All right, good morning, everyone. I'm still seeing some folks come rolling in, which is fine. We've got a handful of things to chat about this morning, so I do want to go ahead and get started so I'm not taking up everybody's valuable time, especially this time of year. Just as a reminder, because we have so many people that are attending our webinar this morning, I am going to keep phone lines muted. However, if you have questions, you can either raise your hand, or if you use the questions section of your dashboard, you can type a question in. I will be watching, and I've also got David Overholt on the line with me, and he will be watching for questions, trying to help answer as the presentation is going on. So I'd like to welcome everyone to our 2017 year-end tips and tricks webinar, and as you can see by the splash or the primary slide there, we're getting pretty close to rolling into 2018, and I don't know what it is, but it just seems like every year goes faster and faster and faster. So we're going to go through some things here this morning. Part one is devoted to typical year-end issues, which are really also applicable to month-end issues as well, because it's focusing on non-payroll related modules. The second session after the break will cover payroll. So if you are not using payroll or you have no interest in payroll, you're certainly welcome to drop out at the break. And I'll probably have a few more people start rolling in at that time, as they will be watching the payroll portion only. If any of you needs CPE, I know I am, and I know this is the end of a reporting cycle, please contact Shannon Barnhart. Her email is there listed on the screen, and just note that you need CPE credit for today's session. We're going to offer an hour per section, so if you stay for both, you'll get 2 hours. If you're only attending one of the sections, you'll get 1 hour, and please let her know whether you attended one or both sections. Today's agenda, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about DWD. I am recognizing a great number of names that are showing up here on the registration list. Some of you folks I am not familiar with, so we'll give you a little overview of who we are. We'll talk about a couple of important things that we want to be aware of, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we want to do for year-end for accounts payable and receivables and general ledger, and even a little bit of inventory as well. DWD Technology Group, we are a division of Doolin Ward and DeWalt CPAs. We've got offices in 3 cities in Indiana: Fort Wayne, Marion, and Indianapolis. Our primary office is the Fort Wayne location. Our Marion office is more of an accounting facilities location, and our Indianapolis office has another one of our Sage consultants as well. We're comprised of 10 software consultants and 11 network engineers. And some of the things that we do typically are training and support and implementation of your Sage software. We will help you facilitate software upgrades. We're capable of doing customizations. We have a master developer, David Overholt, on staff, and we've got a couple of other gentlemen who do some scripting programming in the background that utilize some of the newer features of the software to facilitate customizations. We also can help you with Crystal and FRX report writing. We'll help you with the data conversion. You're transitioning information from one piece of software to Sage 100. We can certainly help you with that. We also can facilitate systems integration. So if you've got other pieces that you want to join and communicate with your Sage software, we can help with that. Some additional things that we do, and as we've been growing, we've been expanding our base of capabilities. We can help you with business intelligence. That's kind of the new buzzword these days. We can help you with reporting tools such as Power BI and Sage Alerts and Workflows. for those of you who are working in the manufacturing world, we've got manufacturing efficiencies that we can help you integrate. There are some third-party tools that will talk directly to your Sage software, scanning functionality, work order efficiency, and warehouse automation. And we also can help you with integration tasks. Say you want to integrate your website and pull information into your Sage 100 software. We can facilitate that, as well as Sage CRM. So some things that we want to consider as far as what Sage has been doing and how they've been functioning over the years. Tax filing year 2013 was the last year Sage used the old style 1099 forms and W-2 forms and 941s. So that version would have been right around Sage 100 version 2013-ish, 2014-ish. So starting with version 2014, you are now required to use the federal and state e-filing and reporting functionality. It's not going to force you to e-file. It does offer you the ability to print forms, but that's the only way that we can get out the documents that are allowed by the governmental organizations. If you do choose to e-file, there are separate fees that will apply, and those are paid to Atrix as they facilitate the e-filing services for you. So we all need to kind of take a look at what version of the software we're currently running. And as we see here on this next slide, here's what the status of Sage is with regard to the versions that it is currently supporting. And you'll note that the current version is now finally 2018. It was released in October of this year. And the three prior versions, 2017, 16, and 15, those are the only valid supported versions that Sage technically will work with. And these are the only versions for which updates have been made available, especially when it comes to year-end processing. And you're going to notice that version 2015 is the last version that's supported this year, and its support drops off next year. So if you're running on anything prior to 2015 and you need to process your forms, we've got to really strongly consider getting that upgraded so that you can get access to the updated forms. You'll notice that phone support also tapers off as each version year comes into fruition. Now, if you've got access to Sage's knowledge base, which I hope everybody takes advantage of, that information is out there, it's accessible. You'll even find references to historical obsoleted versions, but the question and answer knowledge base is out there. Let's talk a little bit about one of my favorite topics, TLAs, three-letter acronyms. There are two important TLAs that come around this time of year. The first of which is called the Interim Release Download. And this particular chunk of software is needed for us in order to facilitate payroll and account payable program changes, as well as program changes for the e-filing and reporting functionality. So if we don't have that downloaded, or if you haven't coordinated with us to help you get that downloaded, we certainly want to do that before you process your year-end forms. For those of you who are using payroll, the other TLA of note is our tax table update, and this contains all of your tax table changes for your federal and state tables, your wage limits and things like that. It does not update your local codes. You are still responsible for those local codes. Even as far as deductions, if you are sponsoring 401k plans, you are responsible updating your own limit. Excuse me, I am wrestling getting over a cold, so I'm hoping my voice hangs out for me today. Regarding the interim release download, do I need to install it? Well, if you have a supported version of Sage 100, then you need to be on a certain product level, and I indicate those here in the list. Sage 100 2015, you need to have at least Service Release or Service Pack 5. 2016, you need to have at least Service Pack 3 installed. Sage 100 2017, you need to have Service Pack 2 installed. Or if you have already made the move over to Sage 100 2018, that version does not have its Service Pack yet. That's coming out fairly soon as well. With regard to the IRDs, though, anytime you install software, do be careful if you've got any third-party solutions or if you've got any custom programming. The way that you can figure that out is if you get into your Library Master module and you get into the Reports section, you can find an installed modules listing report, and that should give you an indication of all of the core Sage 100 products and any other third-party additions that are installed. If you see anything that references some sort of an extended solution, you might want to contact your reseller if it is not us, and make sure that installing the IRD does not have a negative impact on your third-party solutions. So we're going to talk a little bit about what do we do at year end, and again, like I mentioned earlier, this is pretty applicable to month-end processes as well, with the exception of payroll, and I'll focus on payroll a little bit later. But when you are going through your year-end or even a month-end checklist, we always talk about closing modules, and my recommendation is make a copy of the company first. I've got enough paranoia in my life that I always feel a little bit better if I've got some sort of a safety net. You never know if your computer shuts down in the middle of doing a backup, nothing that we can control, and that might just have a bad effect on closing. So if we have something to revert to, we can get back to a known state and we can continue. A lot of times when I'm speaking with my clients, I will show them the list of modules, and I usually say the typical rule of thumb is start at the bottom and work your way up. For the most part, that is true. There are a couple of modules that will be a little bit out of sequence from that general philosophy, but the listing that I'm showing here is the recommended order of closing as Sage requests. So you would start, if you have these modules, you can close them. If you don't have them, don't worry about it, right? Bill of materials, work order processing, barcode, and so on. And then once we get through, the very last module that we typically close is the general ledger module, because that's the one that controls us. Once it's closed, we can't post back into prior periods. Let's talk a little bit about accounts payable this morning. Major modules have what I call control accounts. Your accounts payable has what I call the accounts payable control account. Your AP aging report is effectively your detail that should support that GL balance. Likewise, AR has a balance on the balance sheet, and you've got an AR aging report. Inventory, you've got inventory balances, and you've got your inventory valuation reports. So these are means by which you can confirm things are posting correctly, you're getting all the information that you need, and as an accountant, running through excuse me, the balance sheet and confirming that all of your balance sheet balances are correct leads to the fact that your income statement is going to be what it is, okay? whether you've got those income and expense items categorized correctly is up to you, but the net income has to be what it is if your balance sheet is correct. So we've got some tools available to us that will allow us to reconcile those pretty well-known accounts and give us an idea of, you know, hey, we're on the right track, or we need to make some adjustments, or what have you. So in the accounts payable module, first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that all of our data entry is updated. And this pertains especially to related modules. If you're using purchase order or job cost or work order or any combination of those have the ability to feed to our accounts payable module. We want to make sure that everything that has potential to affect accounts payable has been posted. You want to then print reports as of your fiscal year end. The listing that I'm showing you here isn't the end-all be-all listing, but it's a good place to start. And any other reports that you want, as you have found need for them, print them out at this time as well. Just a little side note, if you're using the paperless way to dump all of this stuff into your electronic filing cabinet, and that way you don't have to necessarily spit out reams and reams of paper, but we can have quick access to those reports, and we know that they're locked in at the time they were generated. So we want to look a little bit at the aging report. As a side note, the aging report is based off the invoice date, okay, and I'll call that the document date. The AP trial balance report is actually based on the general ledger posting date, regardless of what the AP invoice date was. And we're familiar with the inconsistencies, especially when we get to month ends, and we might be dating an invoice document with a date in 1 month, but we happen to post all that stuff to the GL in a different month. Right now, we know that we are not going to be in balance as of a specific point in time. So we want to use these tools to help us figure out, is that what really happened, or is something else in play that is causing us to not reconcile the dollar amount that's on our GL with respect to the dollar amounts on our detail reports. Few other reports that you want to consider if it's something that you need to have. You might want to get the vendor purchase analysis. You might want to get the monthly purchases report. And some of these reports actually get their information purged out upon a month end or a year end closing, especially the ones that are entitled monthly such and such report. Those are only viable for the month that is currently open. You'll notice that you don't get to put a date on those particular reports. So those are only good for that one period of time. Once that period closes, then the reports will start with the new information for that new month. You do want to watch out for the check history report. There's an option in your accounts payable module for the number of months to retain check history. So if you don't have that maxed out and you do a certain number of months closing, it's possible that some of that early information will start to trickle off. What happens when we close a module, and specifically what happens when we close accounts payable? Well, based on the number of days to retain paid invoices, and as I just mentioned, the number of months to retain check history, certain information is removed from certain data files, and you might have to go look for things in other places. With regard to the number of days to retain paid invoices, when you go to an inquiry on your vendor and you go to the Invoices tab and you see that list of invoices, That is all because those are invoices that are allowed to stay in the open invoice file. Once, excuse me, once we do a year-end processing, or even a month-end processing, and we have surpassed the number of maximum days, things that are closed, before that number of maximum days, they're only going to be accessible in the histories files. So they're not gone, but you can't see them necessarily from the vendor inquiry anymore. You actually have to do a history inquiry to find those documents. For the checks, you've got 99 months to hold on to your check history. After we pass that particular point in time, then those early checks will start dropping off. With regard to vendor 1099s, we've got a function in the AP reports section. It's called the Form 1099 e-filing and reporting. This is powered by Atrix. It's that third-party solution. If you've done your W-2s, if you use payroll, it's the same feature, it's just the vendor side of it. In order to use this, you do need to have an active maintenance plan, and you would have to be on supported versions, as we discussed earlier. You'd have to have the proper IRDs installed. And when you go to print this, and I get this question so much this time of year, what do my forms need to look like? With Atrix, many of the forms will print all of the grid lines in addition to the information, with the exception of the federal copy of the 1099 and the 1096. You must have the red pre-printed forms for the 1099s. Your recipient copy can print on blank paper, typically a 4-part perforated paper, and if you've got that with the instructions pre-printed, that's awesome. If not, just print the instructions, because you'll get that opportunity to do that along with the federal copies. And unlike older versions of Mass 90 Sage 100, we actually get a real copy of the 1096 to print out. In days gone by, we used to have to, oh my goodness, pull out a typewriter and typewrite or handwrite the information on the 1096s. So the Atrix feature gives us a lot of functionality and flexibility, makes life so easy. And as far as alignment, I have yet to come across an issue where the forms are not aligned properly. So that's kind of cool. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wander over to the accounts receivable function. And very similar to accounts payable, things that we want to watch out for is make sure that we've done all of our postings, especially things like sales order and job costing, because again, that can feed into the accounts receivable module. If I am applying finance charges, I want to make sure that I've got those calculations done and posted. If I'm printing my customer statements, I'd like to make sure that those are all out the door or at least printed. Again, any of the reports that I want for this particular module as of year end, I might want things like my aged invoice report. I may want my AR trial balance. Again, there are other reports that are out there, and some folks might want them, other folks haven't found a need for them yet. And like accounts payable, the aged invoice report is based on the actual invoice date, whereas the AR trial balance report is based on the general ledger date. And that is typically used as the tool to reconcile to your general ledger. So we want to keep an eye on that. Other reports, some of which get their information purged at month or year end, customer sales analysis, a sales analysis by salesperson. Here's a couple more of those monthly reports. They are only viable for the current open month. Once that month closes, the new month starts and that information refreshes. So you want to get those reports before you do the closing of your modules. What happens when AR closes? Pretty much regardless of whether it's period or year end, we have a similar number of days to retain paid invoices. So again, when I'm looking at a customer inquiry and I see invoices on their screen, they're still in the open file until I meet the criteria of having closed and having surpassed the number of days to retain those paid invoices. I want to then go to AR history inquiry in order to find out information of those things that I can no longer see on the immediate inquiry. I purge my monthly cash receipts. And then any temporary customers that that have a $0 balance, those customers will be purged from my AR customer list unless I have the option set to retain temporary customer paid invoices. So if they've got a $0 balance and I still want to hang on to them, I want to make sure that in my AR options, I have this check mark enabled so that I don't lose that customer information. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Can I just get a quick hand wave from everybody? Can you click on your raise your hand thing? Make sure I'm not losing anybody. Oh, hot zippity. Y'all are awake. That's awesome. Okay, I'm going to jump over here to some inventory. And then when I get done with that, I'm going to go back through and talk a little bit about some other things to watch out for when we are trying to reconcile at the end of periods. So in inventory, if you're doing your physical count, make sure you freeze your inventory, and you might want to print your physical count worksheet. Make note for those of you who are using inventory that when you print that physical count worksheet, you have the option to either print, to freeze everything basically at a 0 quantity or to freeze everything at their current quantity on hand. Makes a huge difference. If you don't think that you had set it one way or the other and you're not paying attention to how you enter the data, you might zero out all your inventory, which I had a client do a few years ago when that option first became available, and that we missed it when we were setting those things. You go ahead and you enter and update your counts. Make sure that all of your other transactional data entry is updated. And for those of you especially using FIFO and LIFO, run that negative tier report, okay? I might have an inventory item that says I have 0 on hand, but when I look at my cost details, I actually see a layer of -10 and a layer of +10. Now, the net of that obviously is 0, but the system still thinks that there are 2 distinct layers out there. We want to now use what's called the negative tier adjustment register to merge those 2 tiers together. I want to blend my negatives with my positives, and whatever that net is left over, that's what my true inventory is. Especially if you got some issues with strange costing and things like that, we really want to get that stuff blended so that we have a more accurate reflection of what our inventory truly is. Purchase order. Also, we kind of want to watch out for that. You know, print your inventory valuation report. That report is as of the moment in time that you run it. So if I run it at 9/29 on December 13th, and then I turn around and I run it again at 4/22 on December 13th, Yeah, I ran it on the same day, but I may have changes because I've had inventory transactions that have occurred. I've had sales, I've had receipts, I've had adjustments between those 6 hours, and so the more accurate report is the one that was actually run later in the day. Um, because of a lot of items that might be on your list, it could be run to your paperless office module. So again, you don't have to print out 50 reams of paper to get your inventory valuation report. And that valuation report should reflect the value of the inventory on your balance sheet. If it doesn't, obviously we've got to figure out why. Maybe there is a reason where yours does not do that. You've got something that you definitively say, I know I'm always going to be off, but that is your knowledge and that's how you choose to manage that. But this is a tool that you can use to help you with that reconciliation. From a purchase order perspective, the purchases clearing report. Again, that report in period end processing of the purchase order module, that one is also run as of the moment in time. So that valuation is when I run that report. If I do any other receipts or invoicing in the meantime, that report could potentially change and it would have an effect on my general ledger balance. All right, the last big module I want to talk about, obviously, is our friend, the general ledger. And anything that is integrating with GL, which for the most part should be pretty much every module that you have, you want to make sure that all that other activity has posted and has been closed. If you're using recurring journals, you would want to make sure that you get those updated. If you've got any general ledger adjustments, any manual adjustments that you need to do, you want to make sure that you get all of those made, especially before you close your year. I have a few clients that may leave their GL open for their fiscal year, and once they get the year end for that previous year, then they'll work on closing modules. That, again, is all your choice. We just typically recommend that you don't leave your GL open any more than, let's say, 18 months. There have been some issues in the past with proper calculations of previous balances. I know, maybe 15 years ago, that was definitely a concern. I don't know if it's any better these days or not, but I don't like to take the chance. So keep your GL closed. If you leave it open for a year, you're not hurting anything. If you leave it open for 4 or 5 years, I might say some bets might be off. So you want to keep your eye on that. If you're using the budgeting functions, you want to go through and you want to enter your budget revisions and update the budget revision register. Make sure your trial balance is in balance. So many times things will happen, and things may have happened 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago, and an out of balance transaction made its way through the system, and then we're all caught going, well, where did this happen and how do we get this fixed? If you always check your trial balance monthly and make sure it's in balance, we can at least isolate to the right period. We can do one-sided entries for those of you who are fairly new to the Sage 100 world, coming from other software. It is possible to do a one-sided entry or an out-of-balance journal entry to bring things back into balance. Some other softwares do not allow us to do that. If you're doing GL allocations, you want to update your allocation journal. And then you've got a handful of reports that you really might like to review and at least have copies of, especially if you're turning information over to your CPA firm in order to help you facilitate your year-end reporting. Things like the trial balance. We've got financial reports. Those are either the standard reports or the business intelligence reports that, excuse me, that we can have written detail report, because that has pretty much everything in it. And again, paperless office if you can, just to save a tree or two. And then finally, some things that happen, especially with the GL year-end process, your net income or loss closes into your retained earnings account. And then based on your number of years to retain various histories, you'll get some summaries recalculated, beginning balances, and some transactional information might start summarizing, and the details no longer necessarily being available. And then if you're doing your auto budgeting, you might have those will actually recalculate for you. So that's kind of a semi-speed session on the various modules and things that you want to consider for your year-end processing. Since I've got some time, what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to go in and show you a few other things that I tend to look for when people ask me to help them reconcile various things. And I'm going to actually get into the accounts payable module. First of all, I want to look at my AP balance. So I'm going to go into account maintenance or account inquiry, and I'm going to find my general ledger account. And I just noticed a question pop in. Give me a half a second here, dear, and I'll come right back to that. So I've got various accounts payable accounts. This particular company has divisions, so I would run my aging reports based on divisions. And what I'm trying to find is my most future balance, and I want to compare that to my aging report dated out as far into the future as possible. So I'm going to pull that report. And I usually date this 12/31 of 5,999. I don't think I'm going to be around then, but we never know. So I look at my last page of my report, and I ran that was Division 2. Let me go get Division 1. Division 1 indicates a balance of $392,739.12, but if I look at my general ledger, I'm off. So I have to figure out why I have a discrepancy here. If these two numbers were the same, but my period end was off, then I would know that's a timing difference. But if my whole value is different, I have to look for things like general ledger entries or postings that affected the AP detail but didn't affect the AP general ledger account and things like that. I want to segue back to the question that has been asked here because that actually is a good point. I have one of the attendees out here says, I'm new to my job in Sage. Company I work for hasn't closed since 2012. Where do I start? And again, let's refer back to that list that we had where we had the order of closing. And first of all, we want to make a copy of our company. And if we have not done that before, that's found under our Library Master, Company Maintenance. And what you want to do is you want to specify a destination company that is not one of your existing companies. So I would specify, I don't know, I often use my initials just because it's easy for me to remember. And then I click on my copy. I review the warning. It says, be careful about copying individual modules. If they are interlinked with other modules and you only copy certain ones, you may get weird results. So when I'm doing copies, probably 99 times out of 100, I'm actually going to copy every module, regardless. The other message is, because it's detected a new company code, it says save that record, yes please. And now I'm going to specify the source. So I'm going to copy from my company, my source, into my destination. And I've been doing this for close to 20 years, and I still stop and read this really, really carefully, because if I don't, I might copy something in the wrong direction. You go ahead and proceed with that. Excuse me. Let it do its thing. That's your backup process. And then to start the closing, we're going to actually go into pretty much the last module. And in our case, this one specified going into bill of materials. And we would do our period end, which bill of materials doesn't have a period end processing. Okay, we can skip that. We know job cost is a later one, so again, refer to that listing that I have in your handouts, and I'm going to start at purchase order because I have a period end processing here, and I would run the function for period end processing. It's going to tell me what period I currently am in, and it's going to offer for me to print period end reports. Well, because I've already printed all of the reports that I wanted before this time, then I would deselect this, and then I would go ahead and click on proceed. And you'll get an affirmation screen that says, we're going to close from period 5 into period 6. Do you want to continue? Yep. And then you can just repeat this process until you get current with where you are. Once you get that module done, bounce up to the next one and go ahead and bring it current. Work your way until you get up to the GL module and get it closed. This, you want to make sure everybody else is out of the software when you're doing this, because if there are certain pieces of data entry that are open, or if people are using modules, the software may deny you from closing. And you don't have to worry if you're that far behind on closing. Don't worry about printing reports, because those reports probably got printed back in the day, and we're not going to get real stressed about it until you start getting closer to the current period. So that will speed up the amount of time it takes to do the various closings. Okay, so that was the kind of a quick view on what to do if you have been left open for many periods. I'm going to bounce back to the reconciliation since I'm still here in the software. Again, same philosophy with the accounts receivable. I'm going to look at my, I call it my infinite balance. So I'm going to look at my infinite accounts receivable aged report, and I want to see what its balance is. And if I look at my AR in total, I should have $6,500 in total accounts receivable. I want to go back to my general ledger, and I want to look at my AR there. Now, again, this company has divisionalized accounts receivable, so I'm going to have to add up all of those values. And this particular account doesn't have anything The 01 doesn't have, it has the $500,000, and this other one has 145. So I see some discrepancies. Place to start is to look for activity that did not affect both detail and GL. That kind of makes sense for everybody. So those are some things that I look for when I go through period or year-end activities. I'm going to open it to some questions now. You are welcome to type those into the question box, or if it's something you don't think you can type in, I can unmute your line and have you speak to us as a whole. I've got a person, I'm going to unmute your line. Go ahead. Gina? I've only got you on the internet microphone. If you need to call in, you can call in through the number. Okay. Got another question that came in. Is it necessary to close modules to protect data or for some other reason? My best answer on this is that there are certain calculations that need to occur with closing the modules regularly. And if, especially if we look back at things like the number of days to retain paid invoices, if I don't close a module, then those invoices would never pop off the open invoice file. Even though they're still in the history file, it might take longer and longer and longer and longer for me to do an inquiry on my vendors because I've got so much information. David, I don't know if you've got another opinion as far as any other good reasons why we want to keep the modules closed.
Yeah, not other than keeping the amount of data you have in the open tables at a lower level. I mean, just keeping them from getting too big.
Okay. Okay, Gina B, I'm going to open your mic up. I don't know if you, I hope you've got internet, Mike. Or if not, I'll have you call in. And Gina R, I'm going to, let's see here. I don't see your phone symbol. Ooh. David, can you help Gina R? She's trying to get a call in because she needs to ask a question, and I don't have her phone. I'm going to roll back to another question. I have multiple years that are still open in our system for all modules. Is there a quick way to close everything and get to the current year of 2017? Technically, I would say no, but realistically, I'm going to say yes. Since I'm presuming you're on a more current version, so like a 2014, 15, 16-ish, what I would have you do is go into each module's options. So let's say, for example, we want to go into purchase order, our setup folder, and then our options folder. And what you could do is maybe get to 2017 period 1 and then actually do a physical closing of the periods in 2017 or the last period of the prior fiscal year so that you can do a real good year-end closing before you roll into your current year. So maybe worst case, you're doing 12 closings as opposed to 60, depending on how many years back you've been open. Okay. Let's see here. I'm still waiting for Gina R and Gina B.
Yeah. Well, for Gina R, I don't see that she typed in the user ID number, which I can't get that to send to her. So.
Oh, I can send it to her.
Okay.
Let's see here. I don't see that she's on phone though. Well, Gina R, did you type in your access code? And actually, if nothing else, Gina, just give us your phone number. Okay. Because I don't see that I can control your phone. Okay. What we'll do, David, can you give her a call? She's got the phone number up there.
I'll give her a call. So.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions here? All right. For those of you who are planning on sticking around for the payroll portion, we're going to take a little break here, probably about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and start the second half of this morning's presentation. Anybody else, if you have seen enough for this morning and you're not interested in the payroll, then you are welcome to continue with your day. And I really want to thank you for coming and joining us this morning, and I hope that this has been helpful for you. Okay, I am going to mute my line for a little bit, but you can still type in questions for me. David and I can still see those, and I'll come back at those. Otherwise, we'll get started in about 10 minutes with the second part of this morning's presentation. Okay, I'm going to get started here in about another minute or so. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this second portion of the year-end tips and tricks. I break these apart because there's a little bit more to payroll, and not everybody uses the payroll module, so I try to let those folks who don't need it exit gracefully, and we can focus on our payroll functions here. Again, if you need CPE, please contact Shannon Barnhart. Just make note that you need CPE, and again, let her know if you need 2 hours for both sessions or 1 hour for the payroll session. All right, some things that we're going to cover here. Again, I'm going to reiterate a few things that I may have already talked about in the first session. I think I'm seeing a couple of new names, so I do not want to completely gloss over everything. We're going to talk about payroll. We're going to talk about what to do and what goes on during year-end processing. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Atrix and printing forms, and then I am going to give you all a sneak preview of Payroll 2.0. Payroll 2.0 comes out with Sage 100 2018. It is the first major redesign of payroll, at least for as long as I've been using this product, and that's been close to 20 years now. So I'm kind of excited, and hopefully you guys will get some of the excitement with me. I'm going to just real quickly skim about DWD Technology Group. I think you guys heard this part before. If you've already heard it, you are welcome to look away for a few minutes. Again, part of a CPA firm here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, full service CPA firm. Our tech group is based in Fort Wayne, and we have a consultant in the Indianapolis area. We've got another CPA location in Marion, which they focus predominantly on CPA financial reporting and services of that nature. We've got 10 software consultants and 11 network engineers, I think pretty much all of whom are certified in some form or another. From a software perspective, we do training and implementation and upgrades and customizations of varying kinds. We will help you with report writing and data conversion, integrating multiple platforms. And some of the newer things that we do, again, are the Power BI and Sage Intelligence reporting, manufacturing and efficiencies, and various integrations with websites and Sage CRM. If you missed this from the first session or the first half of the session, as of 2014, users doing your own payroll forms are required to use the Atrix-powered federal and state e-filing and reporting functionality. We cannot get updates to any of the older forms anymore. And if you do opt to e-file, there are additional fees, but that's all facilitated through Atrix. Versions, again, just as a reminder, 2018 is the latest and greatest. 2015 is the oldest version that Sage supports. Now, DWD, we're going to support what you have to the best of our ability, but if we run into situations that we cannot assist you, then we will definitely need to talk about upgrading you and getting you onto a current platform. For payroll, here's where we're all excited. What do we need to do? Well, make a backup prior to closing the payroll quarter. Payroll is the only module that does not close on a monthly basis. So you've got your calendar quarters, January through March, April through June, and so on. These are separate than your fiscal year. If you are not a calendar year entity, it's okay. Payroll is payroll, is payroll, is quarters, is calendar year, period, end of story. The number of years history can be defined if you've got the perpetual history option enabled. If you don't have that enabled, I strongly recommend you go get that enabled ASAP. And you must close your quarter prior to updating your payroll that is dated in the new quarter. Since we're getting to the end of the year, you know, we run those last payroll checks somewhere that maybe last week of December, and then by the time we get in and run that check for the first or second week of January, we have to have that quarter closed. But everybody says, well, I don't have all my reporting done. That's okay. One of the benefits of Atrix is that it can refer to prior periods, so it's not as detrimental that you get that quarter and you're closed. However, if you need to do adjustments to your payroll, like you've got fringe benefits and things like that, make that backup. We'll make the adjustments in the backup company and we'll run the forms out of that backup company. But that shouldn't stop you from getting things rolling forward into the new year. One point of note that I've had a couple clients do to me, they've gotten in and they've closed their quarter and closed their year end to be able to run payroll for the first of the year, but then they needed to go back and make adjustments. So they just manually reset their payroll dates in their payroll options. Please don't do that, ever, ever. Payroll pretty much the only module that I might smack hands if you play with the date, because there's so much that can go wrong and so much that has to be redone in order to get things caught back up correctly. So once you've got your period closed, please do not reopen it. It just won't work. What happens when we do a year-end processing? Well, the check history file may be purged. If you've got perpetual history enabled, then you can purge that file manually. Here's one of the big things. Employee benefits get reset. Year-to-date and quarter-to-date earnings and deductions get reset. Year-to-date taxes get reset. Okay, that's why it's so imperative that you do not play with the dates in the payroll options. Terminated employees can get purged. Now, the newer versions of Sage 100 actually give us an ability to maintain terminated employees for a longer period of time. That is to help with the Atrix reporting. So it's a minimum of 2 years before those terminated employees get purged. So don't be surprised that you close your year and then you go into your employee listing and you see employee IDs, but you know they're terminated. That's the software doing what it's supposed to do now. Within a couple of years or whatever period of time, then those employees will start dropping off. Printing your tax forms via Atrix. Well, because version 2014 is no longer supported, you must be on version 2015 or higher. You have to have the function, the federal and state e-filing and reporting installed on the computer from which those forms will be printed. You may see that option in your menus, but if you click on it and you don't have the e-filing and reporting installed, you'll get a message that says, hey, you need to go install this. And you should be current on your Stage 100 maintenance plan. Forms, what can we print? We can print pretty much everything that we need. For federal forms, your 940, your annual federal unemployment tax return, you can always do your quarterly 941s. We can certainly get our W-2 forms. And what's nice about the federal forms is you don't have to have pre-printed documents anymore. You can use plain paper, especially for the federal copy of the W-2s. It is strongly recommended for the employee copy that you get 4-part perforated paper, ideally with the instructions printed on the back, or as long as you provide them instructions in some fashion, if you print them out yourself, that's okay. But all of the grid lines and all of the data will automatically be placed on the paper. You don't have to use the pre-printed forms. And if you're in a position where you have enough employees, then you can, or even if you want to, you can just go ahead and e-file, and you'll remit fees to Atrix in order to facilitate that. The cool thing about that is once you've given your information to Atrix, the burden is on them to make sure that the filing is timely and appropriate, and they will be your backup if there are any problems with whatever governmental agency. State tax forms. I'm going to just use Indiana as an example because that's what I'm most familiar with, but we can do our unemployment form, the UC-1-5A. We can do our withholding forms, the WH-1. The WH-3 actually comes as part of the W-2 processing, so we can get that if you've got Ohio employees or Michigan employees or Illinois employees. Those particular states can also be facilitated as well. And again, we don't have to have pre-printed forms for these documents. Based on Indiana law, if you have paid 25 or more employees during the course of the year, meaning you're filing at least 25 employee returns, whether or not they're still employed, you must e-file with the state. So check your records, and if you need to get e-file, we need to help you get signed up with Atrix so that you can make that happen. And I've got a question here. Linda, I'm going to open up your mic. Yes, ma'am. And if you don't have a mic, can you type your question in the questions box? Okay, I'll wait for that. I'll keep an eye to see if that question comes on in. As far as Atrix itself, because it's its own separate software, it has its own updates that can come available. We're expecting to see those sometime this month. And just as a caution, basically from now until about the latter part of January, don't be surprised to see Atrix updates on a frequent basis. It is possible that you might start processing forms. You do an update. When you do that, you come back a couple days later to get back into them. You might have to download another update. You might go in 2 or 3 times and not see an update, and next week you'll see another update. Don't be surprised by that, and I'm going to kind of walk us through a little bit later on what we might expect to see when we get those downloads. So when you get prompted for those, don't ignore them. It is important that we keep everything up to date as possible. And when we go in to actually download the Atrix updates, you will get a confirmation screen to confirm that your maintenance plan is current. And if it is not, then you will not be able to print live forms. Some screens that you would expect to see when you're doing the updates. The first one that you would typically get after you select a form and start to generate it is this one that has the 4 buttons on it. Select the automatic update. As long as we don't have any problems downloading, then it should be a pretty easy and relatively quick process. And if you do encounter errors, there are a number of back doors that we can go through in order to get the updates to occur. Sometimes I've had to go in and manually download the actual program. A lot of this has to do with your internet options and security settings, and there are a couple of things here that I want you to make note of. When you change these settings, do this in Internet Explorer. That is the browser that is integrated with Sage 100. I know a lot of us tend to use Chrome or Firefox, but if you're going to make these changes in your trusted sites, do that in Internet Explorer. And then again, if we're still struggling, we might have to manually download it. There's maybe only been one time that out of all of my clients that I was not able to get the Atrix to update correctly, and it finally took an act of IT God to open up certain ports in order for it to run. So sometimes you have to fight it a little bit, but we can get it done. Question that just came through: are the employees able to download their W-2 in tax software through Atrix? I have never had anybody attempt that, but you could, there's an option as we go through where you can actually send the W-2s electronically, and that might be the tool that they could use to do their own tax software with their W-2s. Since I'm unsure of that answer, Linda, I'm going to make a note of that, and then if I find out some specific information on that, I will absolutely forward that to you. Okay, that's kind of the discussion of the forms. I am going to, before I do the sneak peek at payroll, I would like to come back and talk a little bit about the actual Atrix functionality. So I'm going to roll in here, and the period end processing, that's where we find the federal and state tax reporting, if you've not done this before. And here is that verify, because I haven't done that yet in this copy of my software. going to go out and it's going to check across the internet, make sure that you're allowed. Now, make note, I am currently in the 2018 version, so this is going to look just a teensy bit different. What you folks will see is a radio button that will let you choose between federal, state, and existing reports. And then you would have a box over here that actually has your particular forms listed. The new version here has split that out into its own lookup so that we can go hunting. And I'm going to process a 2017-941. And you would note this 941 form is a quarterly form, so you'd want to make sure you have the correct year and the correct quarter. Definitely want to have your federal ID number in, because it does bark at you if you don't. The company information comes from your library master company information, so if this is not completely populated, I would recommend that you populate it now. And then you can go ahead and proceed. And Atrix goes out and it says, all right, let's start gathering data. Because I have not done my Atrix update yet, it's going to prompt me for the automatic update. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and do it. Because this is the very first update with this version, it is just a little bit longer than typical updates that you would see if you've been keeping fairly current. I'll let that plod along. And don't hesitate, if you've got questions, go ahead and type them in. I've got a couple seconds here while I'm waiting for this to go through. If you need assistance, by all means, let us know. Very, very happy to help you go through this with your own software. I've had people already start making appointments with me about a month or so ago, so I can make sure that I can help them do their processing. And of course, I probably should have done this update beforehand. I'm going to let that bail out. I'm going to go ahead and continue expired just so that we can keep moving forward here, just to show you what this may look like if you've not seen it yet. And what Atrix does is it walks you through a wizard, and it asks you to confirm some information. So, yep, this is my federal ID number. Here's all my address information. It probably gets angry if I don't have certain pieces filled in. And then, am I filing for my own company, or am I a third-party preparer? I would say 99.999% of us are filing for our own company. It is going to prompt us for specific localities, and depending on what types of tax withholdings we've got set up for our local, state and local jurisdictions. It wants to make sure that you've got proper numbers for this entity. I'm just going to buzz through here and get something set up so that it won't yell at me here. Okay. Am I combining my W-2 information or my 941 information from multiple company codes? Some folks I have will split out maybe officers in one company so that the payroll can stay sheltered, if you will, and then they'll have their other employees in the regular company. We really need to merge those two data sets together because it's the same federal ID number. If that's the case, then we can merge that data, or no, I'm going to just proceed with a single company. And then we get offered an advertisement from Atrix. Do you want to have them do everything for you? I usually just ignore that. But then what they ask here is any of the red fields, fill them in. So they will make sure that you fill out all the pieces of information before you continue in order to get all of the data as correct as possible. Up the top here, we've got a status bar. It shows us, I'm going to review and edit my information. I can print an internal copy, and then I can process a fileable copy. So I've hit one prompt. What kind of a filer am I? Am I a monthly or a semi-weekly? If I'm a semi-weekly, it knows to go to the Schedule B and fill out the Schedule B. Fill out phone and company information and make sure of all of the boxes being filled in. Once I have everything filled in, I can go ahead and move to the next step. And it's going to go ahead and take me into my copy. When I print this physical copy, it's going to actually be watermarked, so it will not be fileable. If I want to get to my fileable copy, I've got to get to the federal copy. And here, again, Atrix is going to throw advertisements at you. You can tell them to stop it, or you can explore what's going on where it will give you the federal e-filing or the print option. And here's where we get to distinguish between what we're going to do. If I'm going to paper file, I'm just going to go to print. If I want to e-file, then I can go in here and I can actually process the e-filing through Atrix. It requires an account with Atrix. It requires a credit card to make the payment to them. Again, if you need help getting some of that stuff set up, let us know because we can work with you on that. And then I can print the formal copy that will be mailed to the IRS. And when I'm done, then I can follow some additional prompts. It recognizes new employees. Did you file the new hire reports that you're supposed to do? If so, you just go ahead and say you're already done, and then that form is ready to go. From a W-2 perspective, there's a little bit more to it because you're actually going to go through and you're going to review all of the static and monetary data for the employees. We know it's an annual form. And again, I'm going to just continue here quickly because I really want to get to the sneak peek. and it's asking me for some more updates. And I'm going to probably not do that right at the moment. I'm going to pass that. Let's go on to the sneak peeks because, again, once you get into the Atrix wizard, it will guide you step by step. If you've got questions or concerns, because you have the payroll subscriptions, your support technically is available directly with Sage. If you need to talk to us and you still want to talk to us, by all means, call us. I know many of you, and I've worked with many of you. Perfectly happy to help you through those particular situations, but just realize that, you know, you're not ever going to be stranded. Someone will be available to help you out. And if it's an Atrix issue, you can contact Atrix. They're really good about responding. If it's a Sage issue, you can talk to Sage or you can talk to us, and we'll help you get through what you need. But you have the opportunity to review all your information before you print it out, and that's really, really huge compared to the way we used to have to do these things. All right, I'm going to do a sneak peek of some of the new features and functions in payroll, and I just want to kind of walk through some of the things that are different. As Sage has been upgrading modules over the past 15 years or so, they're updating the way the data entry gets made. We're going to more of a grid-like data entry rather than field by field by field by field. We talked about just a couple moments ago where we might have a whole company separate because we want to keep our officers in one company, and because we just don't want everybody to see what the officers are getting paid versus our other employees. Well, now with Payroll 2.0, we have the ability to put security on our departments. So if a user doesn't have access to a particular department, they're not going to be able to see information about employees in that specific department. So in addition to that, they've also included payroll batch entry. As we see through a lot of our other modules, we have our batch entry process, which means that we can create a batch where Mary's working on something, and then David might create his own batch and he's working on something. And when David's ready to update, he can update. When Mary's ready to update, she can update, and we don't crisscross over each other. The payroll batch really becomes helpful if I've got, especially if I've got the departmental security. I can process all of my officers in one payroll batch, keep it unique, compared to all of the other employees being processed in their own batch. Again, with the updated version of this module, most of the reports are now crystal-based. In fact, I think pretty much all of them are now crystal-based. So that means that we have the ability to customize some of those standard reports that we used to never be able to customize. And then the last big thing with Payroll 2.0 is a concept called tax profiles. In Indiana, we have reciprocity with a number of our surrounding states where we have to withhold the employees' residence withholding state, but yet we have to also withhold local non-resident taxes for whatever county they're working in. So we might, and it's always interesting, if you will, to get that stuff set up. With the tax profiles now, we can set up templates and make it a lot easier to apply a profile, a tax profile template to an employee, and that way we know that their tax setup is pretty easy and can be modified quickly because we're going to modify the template rather than having to find every employee. So let's go take a quick look at what's going on in payroll. And just to give you a flavor of the data entry screen, right away we can start to see some differences, and I'm going to call it cleanup of all of the information that's on the screens. Obviously, we've got our mailing address information, we've got our social security and birth date information over here in a really clean spot. We've got their title, are they full part-time, are they a seasonal or a statutory employee, are they active, inactive, terminated, dates of different types of activities, when did they get hired, when was their last review, when did they get terminated, when did they get rehired. Sometimes that's a piece of information that needs to be known, especially for like 401k viability and things like that. On the additional tab, again, cleaned up a little bit. We've got our demographic information here. We still have our sort files and our emergency contact information, and we actually have 2 emergency contacts now. Before we only had the one. Is this employee a veteran, and when did they separate from military service? Benefits. A cleaned up view of the different types of benefits that are available, the vacation, the sick, and the personal time. Are they eligible for medical coverage, and as of what date? We can set up time off codes, and these are the old benefit schedules. So if you're using benefit schedules, the new terminology is going to be a time off code. When are they eligible for that? And then what status, how much time do they have accrued, how much they have used, what's their limits, how much do they still have available. So a lot cleaner presentation. From the tax perspective, we're going to see what the different groupings are like. So everybody's going to be applied to federal, and then you might have a state, and then you might have some variation of local taxes. For our friends over in Ohio, we might run into things like school districts and cities and counties and, you know, all different kinds of things that have to get merged together. We can blend all of those now and make that a lot easier to deal with than the way we've had to do this in the past, where we've had to make up interesting codes and maybe combine rates and do things that made it more difficult to separate things out. Pay defaults. We now have more pay rates. We used to be limited to 2, but now we've actually got up to 9 different pay rates that we can track with respect to an employee. We've got the automatic earnings codes, which has been around for a little bit, but if we have those different earnings codes, we can set those up. If you notice, our earnings codes are longer now. We've got actually 6 characters to define an earnings code as opposed to the 2 characters that we've had in the past. We can get our summary here of the different type of pay and how much has been paid. We can get that annual quarterly summary. We can also see a snapshot of the deductions. It's a lot cleaner, makes a little bit more sense to read through. And then we get our check history or our pay history, similar to what we've had in the past. And we can get into our tax summary information, whether we want to look at federal, state, or local. And if we need to make any modifications to that, we would have the ability to do that. We can see the hours worked. So a lot more information available at our fingertips than what we used to have in the past. From a data entry perspective, you see here that we still get the pay cycle prompt, but if we get in and define in our options that we want to do the batch processing, we can enable our payroll batches. And now we can separate data entry, and you can actually have multiple people putting data entry in for the same pay period or same payroll run. Get your starting and ending dates. You can define your check date up ahead of time, which deduction period you're working. Oh, come on. Good enough. Starting and ending dates. There we go. Whether or not you want to automatically pay the employees, that all still is pretty similar. But now when we get into our data entry, you can see I can resize the screen a little bit, which we've never been able to do before. And we can go ahead and start picking our employees. And we also find out things that if I've got an employee who's on a biweekly pay cycle, I shouldn't be picking an employee for a weekly pay cycle. So when we set that up at the beginning, it's starting to help us really be clever and delineate who is going to be paid when. So I'll grab my one employee here, and we can see how the data entry is more grid-like and actually makes it a little bit easier. If I want to drag columns up, I have that ability now. So I've got the ability to customize my data entry a lot more than I have had in the past. And you can see how the different codes, and you notice my deduction codes, I can actually use real words now. Won't that be fun and make it a little bit easier to figure out what deduction is what? So a lot of new enhancements that have come along that are ready for us now. We are not dropping in upgrades to Sage 100 2018 yet. We always like to wait for the first service pack to come out, and we expect that kind of at any time, but just from a planning perspective, we're looking at probably February or March before we really will get into doing any upgrades if you would like us to get you upgraded to the new version. So just be aware that this is out here finally, and there are some really amazing features with the new Payroll 2.0. And if you want to get on the schedule and have us help you get upgraded, just let us know and we will absolutely do that. I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions again. If you would like, you are welcome to type in questions, or if you need to speak your question, feel free. We'll see if we can get you. Okay, Linda, I'm opening up your mic, and I don't know if you've got an internet mic or not. If not, go ahead and type your question in, and we'll address it. Anybody else have any questions? I'm going to wait for Linda to type hers in. Again, if you need CPE, please let Shannon know. And if you don't have any other questions, you are welcome to dismiss yourself. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining this morning. And if you have questions, there we go, pay cycles. Okay. The question that has come up is with regard to the pay cycles. Let me go back to that screen real quick and show you what that is about. On certain deduction codes, it is possible to define a pay cycle for which that deduction code gets applied. Sometimes insurance is an example, because insurance is done on a monthly basis, but if we have, say, biweekly or weekly payrolls, you might end up with a third or a fifth pay period during the course of that month, and you don't necessarily want to withhold that insurance, because then you'd be over withholding. So if you actually changed so that you would only do it 4 out of 5 periods, when you did get to that 5th pay week on a weekly cycle, then this particular deduction would not be withheld. So if you don't have any deductions that are time sensitive or period sensitive, it kind of doesn't matter what deduction period you opt for. But if you do have deductions that are taken only at certain times, then you want to be cognizant of picking the correct period so that you don't over withhold from an employee. Okay, anybody else have any questions? I hope that answered that appropriately for you, Linda. All right, very awesome. Again, I thank you all so very much for joining us here this morning. If you have any questions, feel free to go ahead and type them in here. We're keeping a record of them, and we will come back and answer. If I don't answer you here directly, we'll get you an answer. And I bid you all a very blessed Christmas and a blessed New Year. Thanks very much.